name is Enrique Renard, and I'm here to share with you something particularly interesting. The Mahatma Letters. For those of you who are not acquainted with theosophy, this title is meaningless, of course, inevitably. But what we are told in theosophy is that there exists a group of very well-developed human beings which somehow manage to assist in the evolvement of our humanity. Normally, among people which have been delving into occult doctrines and so on, it's known as the White Brotherhood. That's what it's known. And we're told it's composed by human beings who have reached individual perfection. That is, perfected human beings. Now, this idea of a perfected human being may sound strange to someone who will associate being human with being imperfect. That's perfectly okay. That's understandable. However, it's not right. It's wrong. If one considers the fact that we are evolving both individually and collectively, eventually we have to realize, we have to come to the conclusion that our individual evolvement will take place until finally it will reach a point in which we will be going beyond what is considered to be a human being. Something much more meaningful, much more powerful, much more wise perhaps, or whatever you want to call it. There will be an unfoldment of this potential that we all human beings, we are told, have within ourselves, this seed of divinity, the seed of wisdom and power and beauty, which is supposed to unfold through the process, through the evolving process I was talking about. Now, once we reach that particular point, then we no longer need to incarnate, we are told. And reincarnation, of course, is a fundamental part of the theosophical doctrines. Without the idea of reincarnation, which is based on the notion of advancement, and given the time necessary for that advancement, well, it's important to keep in mind that eventually we will reach that point of perfection. Since the idea is that the planet is a school, not a place for fun, not a place for happiness, but simply a school. And we are in this school involved for quite a while. When we have graduated, that is when we have reached final perfection, and we have reached what is known in esoteric lore as the 5th major initiations, and that initiations we will discuss later on. Then the individual does not have the need to incarnate again. In that particular case, he is given a number of choices. 7 of them, to be precise. The main one, perhaps the most difficult one, the one that exacts from us a great deal of sacrifice, is to incarnate again when we don't have to do it, when we don't need to do it. But it is essential for us, if we are to assist humanity in its involvement, to be incarnated. Otherwise, the work that needs to be done along those lines cannot be done. That's a problem. So therefore, we need to incarnate, even when we don't need to do it. And furthermore, there's nothing spectacular about that incarnation, or different from any other human being. We have to come through a woman, like anyone else, and transferring our consciousness into a small body of a baby, forgetting absolutely everything that we are and that we know, and then grow up as children, usually remarkable children, but still children, without really remembering who we really are and the need and the mission that we need to accomplish, essentially. It is a tremendous sacrifice that is made, because these people have earned their liberation from the problems and woes and difficulties of physical life. They will not be subjected to them the way human beings normally are. Number one, because they don't have a karma to deal with to begin with. That has been already settled. And second place, because most of their work is totally anonymous. and they remain anonymous for the rest of humanity. And this is the main reason why they are not very well known. They are not known at all in Occident, and the ideas some people have about them in the Orient, in religions such as Hinduism and Buddhism, are usually wrong also. This is a choice that they have. They don't want anybody to be sure that they exist, for a number of reasons which are very valid. They need their privacy if they are to accomplish the work they have in mind. Now, the name Mahatma is really not a name. It's a title. The word Maha means more or greater, and Atma meaning the soul. So, a great soul. That's what it means. That's what they are called, the Mahatmas. Some people call them the Masters of Wisdom. Some, the White Brotherhood. Some, the planetary hierarchy. There are different names given to the group. But it is thanks to their presence in the world that we continue to advance. Their assistance in this sense is indirect, but it's fundamental. It's very important. This is something that without which we just couldn't possibly advance. We need that help from those who know better. They are perfected human beings. These are the Mahatmas. About 63 of them, I am told, that constitute the hierarchy. Most of them living in the Himalaya, that is the Trans-Himalayan Tibetan fastness, in which they have their bungalows, and that is where normally most of them have their existence. Some others of them, not many of them, the minority of them, are disseminated all over the world in certain places where their work takes place. It's work that nobody really knows anything about, but it's very important work that they do in those areas, which are connected to certain centers of energy that the planet has. Essentially, fundamentally, that is what they need to do, and that's what they do. Some characteristics about them, the masters, you can find in my website, where you will find an introductory course to theosophy. In lesson number 6, we give all the details on what the Mahatmas are all about. But in this particular mini-seminar we're doing now, it's been necessary to give a little bit of summation of what these gentlemen are all about. Very important. This is the reason why this mini explanation has been given concerning their title and their existence. Now, they came about to be known by us through Helena Blavatsky, who, as you probably know, wrote 2 fundamental works, Isis and Veil, published in New York in 1877, and The Secret Doctrine, published in London in 1888. And these are 2 major fundamental works in occult science, which practically gave rise to most of the serious literature on esotericism that was written during the 20th century. So it's very important. These are seminal works, really, fundamental. So, she, being an initiate and being the student, or the disciple, or chelas as they call it, or one of the masters, was qualified because of his disposition, psychic and otherwise, plus a remarkable goodwill to sacrifice anything in order to deliver this knowledge to humanity. Well, she was the one that brought to the attention of the Western world, to the Occidental world, the existence of these masters. Of the 63 that I mentioned, we know about 15 by name, but those names usually are aliases. They're not the real names, most of them. And the ones who acted most directly in this particular case was the Master Moria, who was the master of Madame Blavatsky, and the Master Kutumi Lalseng. We refer to him for reverence and respect, but just his initial KH. Now, the thing is about this mini-seminar is to point out the fact that these letters that were written to a British citizen who lived in India in the city of Allahabad represent the only dispensation of occult knowledge that comes directly from the hierarchy. There is none other, not that I know of, not that I have been inquiring left and right, nobody knows of any other type of dispensation, of this type of information that has been given to the world. Everything that has been given in this sense to the world has been given to remarkable people which are initiates, great avatars which have incarnated to bring us words of wisdom and information. In this particular case, Madame Blavatsky was the person, the intermediate between them, between the hierarchy and us, to the works that she wrote, which were in some ways dictated to her, because some of the things touched in those books, you know, are of scientific nature, of which Madame Blavatsky was not very familiar with. So those parts were dictated to her by this masters, two of them, the master Moria, as I mentioned before, and the master K.H. Now, when Madame Blavatsky arrived in India, after founding the Theosophical Society in New York, and finding out that dissemination there was very difficult because of the influence of the Christian establishment, she moved the society to India, Bombay in the first place. Now, in Allahabad, there was a British citizen called Alfred Sinnett, Alfred Percy Sinnett. Mr. Sinnett edited a newspaper called The Pioneer. It was widely written, widely respected as well by the Anglo-Indian community. In those days, remember, we're talking about 19th century, India was a colony of the British Empire. Now, Mr. Sinnett was respected as an editor. He also apparently was a person, you know, in many ways, you know, straight, decent, a gentleman in any way, in every sense of the word. And he had earned reputation as a good editor from a good newspaper, one of the best in India, widely read. Now, he had heard about Madame Blavatsky arriving in Bombay, and he was very interested in spiritualism. He had been at some seances in London, and he was impressed to see that some of them were fake, but most of them were legitimate. But nobody could explain to him the mechanics of how this happened. Some of the explanations given to him confused him more than anything else. And he had found out that somehow Madame Blavatsky was a great medium, which could really command sessions which particularly effective and interesting in bringing people from the other side, so to speak. So he wrote a letter to her, explaining, identifying himself and telling her that he was very interested in meeting her personally, because he was interested in spiritualism. Now, Madame Blavatsky probably examined him somewhat occultly, in some way, some sense, and discovered that he was someone that was worth contacting. The second thing was, of course, that in order to disseminate theosophical doctrines, some degree of contact with media had to take place. And that paper was widely read in India. It was widely respected as well as an editorial opinion. Therefore, it was, she probably felt that it was a good instrument for the expansion of theosophical knowledge in India. And there was also the thing that theosophy in general is pretty similar to Buddhism and Hinduism. So therefore, there were a number of things that she felt were appropriate, you know, for the dissemination of theosophical information. So she wrote back saying, look, we're very busy now trying to set up the society here in Bombay, but the moment we have the time, we will do a little tour on northern India, and since your city is kind of, you know, northeast of India, we can drop by and we can talk. So it took about 8 months before the meeting took place, in which Madame Blavatsky and her associate Colonel Alcott visited Mr. Sinnett and his wife. And they had, of course, an interesting presentation, an interesting talk and so on. And then she found out about his interest in spiritualism. I said, well, listen, we can do that, but let me tell you something. This is not really something important. It's even something a little bit dangerous. I will explain you why. But what we really do have, which is much more interesting that you might be interested in, is the noblest, the highest, the loftiest type of philosophy we can possibly think of, which would represent something important for humanity at large. Now, since you have means of media to disseminate knowledge of this nature, maybe you would like to help us in this endeavor. But, of course, I have to tell you what it is. So then she explained to him some of the basic theosophical doctrines. Probably because Mr. Sinnett was inwardly well developed, at least to that extent, he was able to immediately understand the value of the information he was given. And his intention or his desire to delve into spiritualism took second place, because he felt that to help in the dissemination of the doctrines he had been exposed to was perhaps a much better thing to do, a much more interesting thing to do. So he became immediately an ally in that sense. Now, he asked her, where did you get this knowledge? Who gave it to you? And then she explained to him about the hierarchy, about the White Brotherhood, that I had spoken a moment ago. And he said then, of course, that he would very much like to meet these masters. She told him that that was impossible, that they are not permitted to take contact with individuals who are not initiates. No matter, regardless of how nice a person may be, how honest, how well intended, and so on, but they operate under very, very rigorous, strict rules, norms, and therefore that wasn't possible. So he said, well, but at least if I write a letter to one of them, to some of them, or whatever, you think I would have an answer? So she said, I don't know, but I could find out for you. So she first asked her own master, the Master Moria, who flatly said no. You know how it is, forget about that. Then she asked other masters that were available to her, because she did have contacts with all of them practically. She has spent 3 years in Trans-Himalayan Tibet training as an initiate and as a disciple of them. So she was acquainted with them. But all of them denied the idea. They just were not ready for that. But one of them did accept. And that was the one we call Kutumi Lalseng. That is not his name. He's originally from Kashmir in India. And his name is pretty complicated to pronounce. But that's not the point. There's no point on divulging their real names. It's not appropriate. It's not prudent. So he asked one of his disciples to give him a name to sign the correspondence. And this disciple came up with Kutumi Lalseng. What is he based on for that? I have no idea. But that was the name in which he was supposed to sign the correspondence, which he did in the first letters. The name chosen by the disciple was Kutumi Lalseng. What did he base it on? I have no idea. But the main thing is that the correspondence, the first letters, were signed by that full name. Eventually, the master just wrote his initials, KH, at the end of each letter. The correspondence lasted nearly 4 years, a little bit more than 4 years. And it constitutes a remarkable exposition of occult doctrines, perhaps the most interesting we have ever received. Among other things, because the manner in which the whole thing worked is Mr. Sinnett had to ask the questions. Then he would get the answers, providing the answers could be given. In some cases, in some occasions, the masters were not authorized to answer certain of the questions put forth by Mr. Sinnett. And so it was kind of complicated, because he wanted to know, of course, he had a keen mind. Most of his questions were penetrating, you know, and valid. And sometimes the master had to excuse himself and say, I'm sorry, I'm not authorized to divulge this type of information. So that limitation Mr. Sinnett had to deal with. But the whole thing went on nicely, and as I said before, it represents an incredible degree of information, completely unedited before. Nobody knows anything about that. The manner in which this was given to us was one in which they were not trying to impress us in any way or convince us of anything. They're not interested in that. They're not interested in recruiting people, the masters. That's not the way they work. What they're interested in is just giving information if we ask for it. Yes, that they will do. And for information that they may be in a position to deliver. If they are not in a position to deliver because they are not permitted to, they will not deliver it, essentially. That's the thing. About the masters themselves also, the important thing is the thing about them is that they live apparently a much longer life than a normal human being does. Apparently they have a method to keep the body young and without disease and without aging. This is what we're told. Going above 500 years, even reaching about, we're told about 700 years or something of that sort. I have no way of corroborating this information. This is what we have been told. But there's one thing that the master says to Mrs. Sinnett in one of his letters. Some people have us living up to 2,000 years and more, and that's ridiculous. So it's obvious that, you know, the length of their life is not what some people assume it is. But it is a long, long life. Not because they like it that way. They don't do anything that they like. They do what they need to do. They need things, this is a sacrifice for them, and they do it, even if they don't like it. And they do it with love for us. They consider us their younger brothers. They are to be considered by us, the elder brothers. That's what they want. They didn't even accept the title of master. We give it to them out of reverence and gratitude for what they've done for us. But they don't accept titles of any kind, and their chief doesn't accept titles of any kind, and so on. They consider themselves, amazingly as it may seem, they consider themselves students. Because in this thing of learning, knowledge has to do with the universe and its laws. In fact, one never stops learning. If one doesn't stop learning, one is always a student. That's important to understand. Now, it's important also to clarify the fact that some people have these weird ideas about the masters, that they are some kind of angels in some sort of faraway heaven of some sort. None of that should be really taken seriously under any circumstances. They are human beings in a human body, and they are tired of repeating and repeating the same thing. If they were angels in some sort of faraway heaven, they couldn't possibly do the work they do. They're incarnated the way we are. And their incarnation is different, as I said before, under different parameters, and it has different circumstances because they are incarnated out of goodwill, not out of obligation. So things are different in that sense. But other than that, they're human beings with a human body. That's an important thing to remember. Essentially, what has happened in this particular case, for those of you who are more or less familiar with theosophy, is the monastic principle, that is, the mind has merged with the intuition, which is the second principle, or the seventh principle of which a man is composed of. Now, the two have somehow merged, the mind with the intuition. And the result of that is wisdom, knowledge to an unbelievable extent. Not only have they knowledge about the laws of the universe, but they also have the knowledge of every scientific field where one can conceive. To the extent that, for instance, in physics, it's stating in one of the letters that the atom is a divisible unit, and it's not the ultimate particle of matter. Those days, we're talking about 19th century, 1880s, the universities were teaching in physics, they were teaching that the atom was the ultimate particle of matter. That's what we thought was the case. Now the master says, no, the atom is divisible, it's made of particles, and it's infinitely divisible, as a matter of fact. Now, Madame Blavatsky confirmed that 4 years later in the Secret Doctrine, which was also dictated by the same master. It took about 11 years from then, so that Sir J.J. Thomson, an English physicist, discovered the electron, thus confirming what the master had said. I have just cited one aspect of science, which is physics in this particular case, but on every conceivable aspect, scientific aspect that we deal with, they are advanced, way more advanced than humanity. Even today in the 21st century, we still haven't reached one single bit as to the real knowledge and information that they have at their disposal. When a human being becomes perfected, his intelligence also increases to an enormous degree. His IQ is very, very high. Say, if it is the normal thing, 100, as it is usually indicated for normal intelligence, well, in this particular case, we're talking about 1,000. These people are incredibly well informed, and their intelligence is really colossal. Now, having explained this now, we will go to the question of the first letter, which I think is a very important thing, because this is what opened the correspondence. Madame Blavatsky received the first letter from Mr. Sinnett, who wrote it to the unknown master, because he didn't know anybody in the hierarchy by now. So he wrote to the unknown master, hoping that somebody would answer. So Madame Blavatsky got back to him a few days after and told him that he would have an answer. You can imagine how elated Mr. Sinnett was to know that he would, in fact, have this answer, this correspondence, and so on. So he wrote another letter, because he felt the first one was not, clear enough, and it's not complete enough, so he wrote another letter to the master. So the master Cage responds to him, saying that, well, I have in my power, in my hands, two letters of yours, and I'm in the process now of trying to respond them. And Mr. Sinnett, in his letter, had made a proposal to the master. He had said, if we want, I have been studying the theosophical doctrines. I think it's something valid. I think it's something legitimate. I think it's something that all of Europe should be informed about. I'm very glad to be able to collaborate with this effort. But, we have to somehow, because of the European mentality, which I, as a European, I'm very well acquainted with, they will need some kind of proof, something that impresses them enough for them to consider the study of these doctrines in a serious manner. So my idea is that to publish a number of the London Times in the same time that appears in same day that appears in London, it should appear also in Allahabad, my city of residence. And a copy of my paper, The Pioneer, to appear in London the same day in which it's published in Allahabad. And those days, we have to remember, those days there were no airplanes, and it would take about 2 weeks for newspapers to get from England into India, and vice versa. So therefore, the thing of the papers appearing simultaneously, both in England and in India, would obviously impress people enormously, according to Mr. Sinnett. And he would immediately invite them, or propel them, to study theosophy. Mr. Sinnett was a great journalist, but he was not very well knowable about human psychology, the human state of evolution of those days. So the master immediately says, precisely because that would do away with skeptics and they would understand what's going on, is that we could never accede to your request. Do you have an idea of what would happen if we do that? Remember Christopher Columbus in chains after discovering a new world. Remember Copernicus being persecuted because of postulating the fact that the Earth revolves around the sun. Now, this is what the master says in the beginning of his letter. Esteemed brother and friend, precisely because the text of the London newspaper would close the mouth of skeptics, it's unthinkable. See it in what light you will. The world is yet in its first stage of disenthrallment, if not development, hence unprepared. Very true. We work by natural, not supernatural means and laws. But as on the one hand science would find itself unable on its present state to account for the wonders given in its name, and on the other, the ignorant masses would still be left to view the phenomenon in the light of a miracle, everyone who would thus be made a witness to the occurrence would be thrown off his balance, and the result would be deplorable. Believe me, it would be so, especially for yourself who originated the idea. This door, though opened by so friendly a hand as yours, will prove very soon be a trap, and a fatal one indeed for you. And such is not surely your object. The master is absolutely right. When people are not ready and they're furnished with some kind of phenomena that they cannot explain, they become very aggressive. And it's something that one should take into account before performing something of that nature. Later on in the letter, the master says, assures Mr. Sinnett, that the consciousness of mankind along this thing has to be somewhat attained at a very slower pace, gradually, very gradually. Otherwise, what you have is chaos and problems of all sorts. One of the things they do have, and which we human beings sometimes fail at, is patience, enormous patience. They're ready to wait for centuries. They're ready to wait for millions of years if they have to, in order to achieve what needs to be achieved. The Master Moria, when he took the correspondence later on, for a while, says to Mr. Sinnett, I know you don't like to wait, but believe me, graduality is one of the most important laws in the universe. For us to achieve something, if we want something to remain exactly the way we have put it forth, we need to do it very slowly. There will be no opposition to that. Polarity will not be involved, and whatever we have tried to somehow issue and install will stay there forever. But it has to be slowly. That's the way important things are achieved, in a slow fashion. This concludes our first segment of this mini seminar on the Mahatma Letters.